Hello, good morning and good afternoon. My name is Damon Baker, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar series entitled Accelerating Organic Growth with Lean Product Development. In a few moments, I will introduce you to your panelist, George Ellis, who will explain a little bit about his background, and then we'll get into the meat of the presentation. Next. Today's presentation is proprietary to Lean Focus. Those of you that have registered will receive a recording of this presentation material. We ask that you please do not disseminate this to anybody other than yourselves who have registered. And if other people need to take part in this presentation, you can direct them to register on our website, and we'll have instructions on where those registrations can be completed and how to take part in this webinar, but also future webinars. Next. A few logistics I'd like to cover off on. All of you will be placed in listen-only mode. At the end of the presentation, we will give you the opportunity to ask some questions, and I will be the moderator for those questions, and we'll read them to the panelist. In addition, in your GoToWebinar display panel, our PDF handouts. There are 4 handouts that you can download. We have an innovation assessment handout, which explains how we go about assessing the innovation process inside of our clients. There's also a very helpful self-assessment that you can download to assess your own innovation process inside your organization. We also have a download on the innovation practice inside of Lean Focus that George Ellis leads, and a sell sheet on the Lean Product Development workshop process that we use to improve the overall product development function inside of a company. A recording of this webinar will be emailed to you a day after the conclusion of today's webinar. If you do not receive that in your inbox, it's quite possible that it may have gone to your spam. So I ask that you check that in case you have not received it. And that should cover the logistics. Next. A little bit on Lean Focus. Next slide. So at Lean Focus, we focus on helping our clients build high-performance cultures. And the high-performance culture is a 3-part equation that requires driven leadership, which are leaders that model the right lean behaviors inside of an organization that deliver outstanding results, guided by principles that shape their decisions. And we have 14 lean principles that make up our principles of our business system. Things like leaders teach, mind over wallet, create continuous flow. And lastly, proven systems or tools that we use to drive value creation inside of our clients to deliver that sustainable high performance year after year. Next. A small cross-section of the types of clients that we work with at Lean Focus. As you can see here, the diversity of sectors or verticals, also the fact that there are many different types of businesses represented here, not only manufacturing businesses, but also service-oriented businesses, with the takeaway being that lean and lean thinking, a high-performance culture applies in any context as it's represented by the slide here. And some of the examples that we'll share to you today will be case study examples in which we've done some of this work inside of our clients. Next. I mentioned the systems component as one of the 3 parts of the equation in how we drive a high-performance culture inside of our clients. We use a set of tools, and what you see here is the Lean Focus Business System. And the primary focus of this webinar is going to be on a subcomponent of the growth system that we refer to as the innovation practice. And George will outline our step-by-step innovation toolbox and how it aligns to help our clients achieve above average organic growth through new product development initiatives. Next. So I'd like to introduce you to our panelist, George Ellis, who will take you through today's content. George?
Hi. So yeah, I'm really glad to be here. Thanks, Damon, for getting things started. I'm glad to be with you guys. Just a minute or so about me and why am I talking to you. I spent about 35 years at Danaher, where most of my time was spent in R&D. But somewhere a few years ago, we started deploying at an accelerated rate lean principles and to our R&D group, and wow, what a difference we got. I mean, it wasn't just that, it wasn't single dimensional, as you often see in lean. It really, we got rid of so much waste. And, we saw that we were making our revenue, we were hitting our targets on time. Our people were getting happier, there was more engagement, more people were being promoted from internally. We won an innovation award. I mean, so much good came. I just fell in love with the application of lean thinking to innovation. And so I decided this is what I wanted to do full time. I mean, I loved R&D, I loved being an R&D leader, but not like I love this. And so so that then began my journey of working in the Danaher Business System Office as we spun off the dental group to become what's now Envista, and then landing here at Lean Focus, where basically every single day, every minute that's available is spent on lean thinking and innovation. Today's talk is going to be about how do we accelerate organic growth. So if you think about what is organic growth, that is the ultimate measure of a successful innovation program. And you might be thinking, especially if you're an R&D person, you might be thinking, hey, what do you mean? It's just we're just here to make money. It's not that we're just here to make money. That if we do good innovation, customers will purchase our products. And the flip side is, if you're doing a lot of products and customers aren't purchasing them, you're not creating much value. And so, that ultimately we look at organic growth as the very most lagging indicator of a successful lean innovation program. So that's what we're here to talk about. How do we accelerate that? We're going to talk a little bit about the problems related to projects and why we struggle. And then we're going to divide the lean innovation, we call it the lean innovation journey. It's a journey because it's 5, 7, 10 years long, from the beginning of Aspire, where we will, we're going to pick the segment that we want to serve, and maybe we don't even know exactly how we want to serve them. And some years, later, we've discovered, what do they need in products? We've designed those products and really spent the energy to create the products they need. We deployed those products, and we've been successful. That's a long journey. Then we'll have some Q&A. So first off, why are we talking about this? Well, the first reason is, and I think you guys, I'm sure you see this in the literature, I see it all sorts of places. We have a reference for you here in just a second. But people are disappointed with the projects that come out of R&D. They just don't deliver what they promise. And any of you that have been in R&D, I think you've experienced this. It's so easy to create Me Too products and what I call spec tweakers. We used to do a 5mm, whatever it was, and now we want to do a 3mm, whatever it is. And so it really is easy to start tweaking specs, and customers, that may be the most important thing to the customer, but it may not be. It might not be. We wind up creating products that aren't even in line with what the company wants, and they don't get sustained over a long period of time. Maybe they hit with a splash and they don't last. We wind up with ambiguous projects. I'm sure everybody's experienced this. I certainly have. There's some kind of project defined. You get 6 months into it. Somebody adds some more things. All of a sudden, we're talking to a whole new segment, a whole new region of the world. We didn't plan to do any of that. Somebody comes and says, "Oh yeah, we got to do a next generation connection to IoT. Can you throw that in?" And so these ambiguous projects, they just go on and on. And it's nothing unusual to see a product that we thought we were going to do in 9 months take us 3 years. That is not unusual. And so these ambiguous projects, they go to unending rework, and then we wind up with, of course, late and half-done projects, which is another derivative of that. Somebody defined a project, then it was all in his head. He left, and now he's over running some other part of the business. A new person shows up. It's all changing. We wind up putting something on the market that's partway done. Customers are complaining. The sales department's really unhappy. We lose confidence. So these late projects, and then when you see half done, and I'm sure you guys have heard this, well, we launched on time. Well, if you didn't launch the whole product on time, I got news for you. You're late. You're late with the part you missed. And then Finally, as we have these unmanaged commercial launches, the hope is a strategy. We're going to put it out there. Let's see how it goes. Let's come back in 6 months. You would never do that with any other part of the business, but we do that. And these are some of the problems that really disappoint people. And so here we have here's one of our, they're one of many, but here's one from PMI. Why do projects fail? You see the first line that according to this reference, people who have good practices, they spend they spend 28% less money than those because their strategic initiatives they're completed successfully. And one of the reasons that the people who answer the survey give: change in priorities. We already talked about that. Change in project objectives, which we talked about that. Inaccurate requirements, inaccurate vision. We talked about that. Spec tweakers. That's an inaccurate vision. And then poor communication. The project does need to change. Something happened. A competitor got a new patent. We've got to do something. And somehow it takes 9 months for the organization to adjust to that versus we come in and in 3 weeks we're realigned. So those are some of the reasons projects fail. I want to talk to you guys about the innovation journey, and I want you to think about how does it apply to where you work. Okay, so everybody has different processes and they all lay out a little bit together. But the things that you see on the screen right now, these things are, I see them everywhere. They're practically universal. Let's go through them. Now, they're not all written down one by one. And some of them, some of them are in the boss's head, some of them are in the product marketing guy's head. Some of them change when the job changes. But these elements, I guarantee you in your organization, they're all there to some extent. First off, there's some sort of aspiration phase. There's some phase, that says, here's what we want to accomplish as a company, and then here's the projects that we're going to define to do that. So, here we're looking at the segments, we're looking at our strengths, we're looking at competitive changes, technology, and we're deciding these are the places we want to invest. Now, I'm not saying that that a lot of companies do it perfectly. I don't think anybody does it perfectly, but maybe you define too many projects, maybe it's not the critical few, but you guys know you have some kind of thing that you do. Maybe in October you all get together and you do a roadmap and you pick out a handful of projects that you're really going to move forward with, and maybe you have another 15 that sort of just tag along. But you go from that, and that's what we call entering the funnel. You may not call it the funnel, you definitely have some sort of funnel. You move into a discovery phase, because what we've got to prepare for is, you see the ink on the pen. We got to sign on the dotted line. Here's the project, here's the resources, here's the time you get, here's the revenue you're going to deliver, here's the features, and so on, right? There's some kind of a commit in the future, but there's some time to go from when that project is nascent to when we're really ready to commit. We call that discover. Again, you have it. It may not even be written down anywhere. I guarantee you that you do not go from saying, oh, we're going to do this new project and tomorrow starting the project. There's always some period where you're defining. Now, between your commitment to the project and launch, there's a bunch of work that has to be done, right? That's really the heart of R&D. That's where you're pulling out all these different functions. That's where hopefully you're going out, you're seeing customers, you're showing them what you're doing. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't, maybe you're just doing a beta unit. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then after the launch discussion, there's some kind of a deploy. The deploy, I've worked in organizations where the deploy is, let's go put it on the website and see what happens. Not a great plan, but that is the deploy. But what I'm trying to say to you guys, everybody has these 3 points. When that project is nascent, when you commit to actually do it, and when you offer it to the market. I used to work for one organization where the boss used to say, we don't launch our projects, they escape. And so maybe you're in an organization where the projects get out bit by bit. I don't know that, but you definitely have something like this structure. And we're going to use this aspire, discover, design, deploy. That's going to be our rock, our North Star. So when we talk about anything in this or future webinars, it's always going to be cast in this structure. And let me go on to the next slide. So let's take a few minutes and talk about what is Aspire like, okay? So Aspire is where we're considering lots of things to do and we're deciding what we're doing. What are the mistakes that we see? What are the things I see? I work with a lot of organizations. What are the things I see commonly, see them myself, read about them? Well, these are the 4 that I believe are, they're very common. The first one is there's some kind of a product roadmap, which might be nothing more than a handwritten list on the wall taped to the wall of the head of product marketing. It's uninspired. It's just got, oh, let's go do version 23 and 24. It's outdated. Oh, that roadmap looks like stuff we saw back in 2021. What's going on now? Well, we haven't had time to update it. I'm sure you guys have seen that. Or it's ambiguous. We're going to go do IoT. Well, what does that mean? We're going to go do IoT or Internet of Things. It means, yeah, we'll figure it out. Very ambiguous roadmaps, as opposed to, I'm going to go get the J25. We're going to put IoT. That IoT is going to feed into our service department. We're going to be able to then pull through service notifications to clients and customers. So that's what I mean by ambiguous. Second thing, product plans they're not aligned to organizational goals. I see this all the time. Somebody in product marketing or in R&D has this cool new technology, or they see a competitor doing something. They wind up defining this product that by itself makes a ton of sense, but it doesn't line up with the company. It's not lined up to our channel. It doesn't go well with our product lines. It has a lot of issues, and those kind of products, you can spend a ton of energy on them, and then they really don't ever grab hold and turn into the products that we want that build our future. The third one is missed opportunities to protect intellectual property. Guys, this one I see almost everywhere. The engineer is like, I figured that out, it's obvious. Well, you're an engineer, you think about this all day long. You're not what the law calls an ordinary person. And what may seem obvious to you is not obvious in general. So if you're one with ordinary experience in the art, okay, but maybe you do this every single day and you're a true expert. So the first thing we start off with is R&D guys that undervalue what they're doing, and technologists that undervalue what they're doing. And then we don't have like that planning and the drive to go get that intellectual property protected. And we miss that opportunity. Once we introduce in the market, we've lost Europe, we've lost Asia, because you can't make an application after you've introduced. A year later, you've lost the US. How many times have I come to somebody and say, wow, that's really different. Did we patent that? No, we introduced it 3 years ago. Boy, I'd like to patent it now. Well, there's not a thing in the world you can do about it. And then finally, thinking small. You guys probably see this. Our R&D department knows how to do this. They're really good at this, so that's what we do. Well, there's a lot of other companies out there that can help you, that can expand what you do. They'll make you a new R&D department years from now, but for the products you have, why not go and engage somebody outside to fill in those gaps where you need to grow? And so that thinking small, these 4 are the most common I see. So let me talk to you about a key concept for what I consider the single key concept for aspiration. And let's just talk about it here. We start with a broad set of candidates. These are just a bunch of project names I made up. We got a whole bunch of projects we look at. We go through some sort of process where we look at our strategy, our goals, we look at our revenue aspirations, we look at all those things, and we pick those ones that we have the ability to do. We line them up into our funnel, and we build an organized roadmap where we have, we have things that we're trying to do in our company, and we show how these products align. Looks really simple, right? It is simple. It's what you do with any other part of your life. It's probably what you do with most others of your business. Doesn't happen that often in R&D. So, and in new product development. So the first concept is consider many, but invest in the few. Okay, and so because we only have the resources to do a handful of things really well. So let's go pick that handful of things. Let's take all of that, we got to go to version 23 and push that aside. And let's go really focus our energy where our strategy wants us to be. You will find this mindset will clean up a bunch of stuff. How many times have you guys gone and worked on a product that really should have been obsoleted? How many times have you gone and added a new feature to a product that was already declining? And, it didn't really make much difference. We could have just let it decline at the rate it was declining at. How many times have you gone and worked on a product where we don't really have even like we don't have full right to play. We have such a dominant competitor. We're such an also-ran. And yet we pour more resources into that. Those are the kinds of mistakes people make. Consider the many, invest in the critical few. That's Aspire. How do we do that at Lean Focus? Every company has different ways of dealing with these issues. I don't think any of this is going to be new to many of you. But at Lean Focus, we take a 3-step process to avoid this. The first step is we align to organizational goals. Our products are driven by our strategy. And you might say, well, we don't have a fancy strategic plan process that takes us 3 months, that comes out with a strategic plan that the CEO reviews with the board. Okay, you have strategy. I guarantee you have strategy. You have those things that your business leader says to you every month, we need to be doing more of this and less of that. So write it down on a piece of paper. Come back to that leader and say, is this our strategy? Tweak it. Wherever you find yourself, and this is such a key concept of lean, wherever you find yourself, take it as your foundation and improve from there. So if all you have is a strategy that's expressed as a business leader who complains that we aren't doing the right things, write down what you think the right things are, schedule a 45-minute meeting with your leadership and say, is this where we should be headed? Because R&D and product management and software development, we need this. And the second thing is segment. You know, I used to come from a company where the expression was, have you segmented? Well, then what you need to do is segment again, get finer. How have you done that? Oh, let me tell you what else you need to do. You need to segment again. And the idea is we understand our customers, what we're doing, who we're serving so well. And so that's how we begin. What is it we want to do? Organize it and align it to the segments that our company's going after. Second thing, consider these many alternatives. We want to look at 3 major areas as we're balancing. Number 1, we want to look at our IP strategy. Where can we develop a sustainable differentiation? And I mean a 20-year monopoly when I say sustainable differentiation in IT, if you can get a patent. But at the very least, what is your strategy? How are you? You know, there's also trademarking. How are you copywriting? But of course, patents. Those are the big gems that give you that long-term differentiation. How are you doing your open innovation? How are you pulling in other companies? So as a development team, we're constantly expanding our capabilities. And then the third one is, are we doing an innovation review where we're really formally looking at all of the opportunities and we're picking the few? And that's our innovation review. And that results in going through an innovation engine, which is one of our tools, which is the whole step-by-step of taking all of these things on the left and putting them into a roadmap that changes how we behave. That's our critical few. What does that roadmap look like? Here's a simplified example of what a good roadmap looks like. Now, when I say simplified, a real one might have 2 or 3 times this on it. If you have a roadmap that you need 6 feet of wall space to drive, you don't have a roadmap. What are the critical strategic products that are driving your success? Do not put every product on your roadmap. I've watched people say, here's all our projects. Let me like restructure all of them so they look like they're in a roadmap. And you wind up with all these little do nothing or do next to nothing sustaining projects that don't need to be up there. This is not a repository for everything you're doing. These are your strategic goals. These are helping you meet those goals. These are the products that are key to doing it. That's what your roadmaps look like. All that sustaining stuff, it still has to happen. Don't misunderstand me. You got to keep the lights on. You got to customize for that big customer. You got to go fix that quality defect. You have to miss that feature that was missing that you didn't even realize was missing. But that's not strategy. So you see here a very simple roadmap, a little calendar on the bottom. You have your project development time showing across in calendar time. You've got your critical new products. When I say critical, if there's more than 10, they're not critical. And then maybe we evaluate it by 3-year revenue. You know, every organization is different. You might look at 3-year revenue. You might look at margin. You might put up there what the cost is in either dollars to develop it or critical resources. And then how does it line up to our strategic initiatives? You know, here's another clue for you. If you have a product and it doesn't line up to your strategic initiatives, hey, big surprise, it's not strategic. And that's okay. A lot of people will hear, oh, my project's not strategic. I want it to be strategic. I want it to get that visibility. You may or you may not, but that's not relevant. What's relevant is it driving that strategy, the strategy? And so that's where so if you can't take your product and line it up under your company's 3 or 4 strategic initiatives around new products, it's not strategic. Get it out of here. Manage it, but don't try to manage it as a roadmap. Okay, so let's move on to discover. So discover is the next section. Discover is that point between the nascent project and I'm ready to go. Now, aspire can last years, right? You go find a new segment you want to work on, you might have to go visit 15 people just to find out what they do. You might have to hire new people in product marketing that are experts in that area. You might have to go get new product or marketing consultants that tell you how that market works. You might have to go to a new, Aspire can be years. Discover is not. Discover is typically, I don't know, I would say anywhere 4 weeks when accelerated, 12 weeks when slow. We're trying to understand, okay, we got the segment, we're going to do a product. What is that product going to do and how do we define it? Okay, so this is a short but extremely important part of the innovation journey. So what are problems that happen when people don't discover? I spent 3 decades plus in R&D, and all of these give me the shivers some nights. We wind up defining these Me Too products and spec tweakers. Somebody in product marketing goes and looks at what a competitor just did, we need that. We already talked about spec tweakers earlier. We fail to find the features that really drive buying decisions. We create products full of nice to haves, but what about things that are going to really drive a decision? Customer X is using competitor Y. What do you have to do to displace competitor Y? It's probably not take the 17th spec on the sheet from 5 millimeters to 3 millimeters. So how do we find those features that really drive buying decisions? We get dull, old solutions all the time, right? Okay, we need this, we need a little bit brighter lamp. How are we going to do it? Well, let's take the old lamp and cool it a little better and put a little more power in it. Or let's go get the next generation of the lamp we had before from the same company and use the same. How many times do you see that? I used to have a friend of mine, he got me started, many years ago, a great mentor to me. He used to say, what you know is what you like. People, they see a solution, they like it, and especially developers, they're like, let's just do that. How do we shake things up? And then this is of course a favorite of anybody in R&D. We get half-baked requirement documents. They don't really say what has to be done, which gives everybody all the wiggle room in the world 6 months from now. And as an R&D guy, I always felt like it was my fault. Something comes in, somebody changes everything, and they say, well, that wasn't a spec, you just didn't see it. Where was it? Well, it was hidden in that line. Right there where it said we were going to be the best. Well, I didn't understand that. We didn't allocate for that. Well, that's your fault. And I hated that feeling. And so, as an R&D team, R&D teams love a game they can win. Give them a set of requirements that they can say, yeah, I can plan that. I will spend the time. Your average R&D team is full of the most diligent people you'll ever meet. They will go through line by line. They will make things happen, but give them a game they can win. So let me just show you one key concept here that I use for discovery. So this is the way that we spend money in a project. When we're in Aspire and Discover, we hardly spend any money. Think about it, right? In Aspire, you have 1 or 2, maybe BD people, maybe a product marketing person, maybe 1 technologist. They're spending an hour here, an hour there. You're not spending much money. And when you go into Discovery, you got a team of a few people working for a few weeks. Okay, during those weeks, it's intense. And you might put 10, 15, who knows? You might even put in 40 hours if you decide we're going to really get together. But in the great scheme of things, you're not spending hardly any money doing that. When you go to deploy the product and launch it, you're not spending hardly any money here either. Where do you spend the money in product development? You spend it in design. That's when you have these teams of 5 and 20 and 40 people working for 5 and 20 months producing designs. That's where the money goes. So, why am I telling you about design when we're talking about discovery? Well, the reason I'm telling you is because the key concept is great discovery cuts rework and design. You see, if I discover a problem when I'm working before the project started, I can restructure. Hey, we need a 40% bigger software team than we thought. Hey, here's a whole persona that we need to perform to and that we're going to have to address, and we need to make that work on an iPhone where before we thought a desktop was enough. Okay, those kinds of changes are cheap in discovery. They don't feel like it. It's like, oh my God, I just spent 30 hours working, now I got to put in another 15. True, but it's nothing like when you discover something like that halfway through spending $5 million. And so we want to do great work in discover. So when we get in design, it's just execution. We are just building, we're aligning to what customers say, but if we do a good job, there's almost no, the navigation is small. No go back and restart anything. And so how do we do that? Well, we look at 3 kinds of waste. And in our discovery process, we want to kick in the head several kinds of ways. And so we've got them grouped in 3. First, we want to discover user workflow, and we want to really understand it. Next month's seminar in January, I'm going to be presenting this workflow, and that's going to be the whole webinar. So I'd like to join you. Hope you don't mind me plugging that, but please join me for that in January. But what are we doing? We're getting rid of the Me Too products and the spec tweakers, and we're also getting rid of what I call the ivory tower developers, people who sit back in the office and wait for marketing to bring them the input they have so they can apply their wisdom. You can forget that. Get on a plane, go sit with the customer, go use it. I remember working on one product where our top engineers went into a retail outlet, put on the apron, and did the work so they could see what our customers went through. Get rid of these ivory tower developer, this mentality that, my job is to sit and, with my big brain and think of things. No, go out there, go use it, go see, go discover, go to Gemba is what we say in lean thinking. Gemba is Japanese for the place where the action happens. Go see for yourself. Don't trust others. Don't look through the filters of others' eyes. So that's the first thing we do. Discover what is the problem we're trying to solve. At this point, we're not even talking about solutions. We're just looking at what the problem is. Then we move into design thinking. And in design thinking, what do? We get rid of the design myopia. This always worked before. I'm going to do it again. There's a guy in application engineer who said, yeah, that worked before. I hated it before. I hate it now. How do I get that applications guy to bring in those customer experiences into that team? How do we get rid of unvalidated solutions where people sit back and they think of great things, but they don't take them to customers? Oh, we'll take them in the beta. Yeah, great idea. We'll take them in the beta when the project's 80% done and there's nothing we can do to really respond to what we learn other than change a color or maybe reword a panel. No, we don't want to do that. We want to get out, be with that customer early on, show them the solution. You can't make the solution because you don't have time. Draw it on a piece of paper, fake it in a video, put something together with duct tape. Do something to show that customer this is where we're headed and have them say, I like that, I hate that. I've been in both. They're both valuable. The first one's a little bit better. The second one that we want to do is unambiguously define the project. So this is our project requirements Kaizen. And so what we're after here is we want to eliminate future scope creep by defining the project. We want to ensure that we don't have conflicting requirements, and we want to ensure that our goalposts don't get moved. We're going to be very solid there. So that's what we do in Discover. Now, let's move on to design. How does design work? So in design, what are the problems first? Design, the thing we want you to focus on is the cost of delay is higher than you think. We're going to focus on the bottleneck to get rid of that delay. So how do we do that? Well, first off, what are the main problems that we see in design? One of them is we fail to meet organizational standards. We get a product out, doesn't meet our standards for manufacturability, it doesn't meet our regulatory standards, whatever it is. We got to go back, do it again. We accept delay as inevitable. I've worked with so many groups where people say, every project we've always done for the last 10 years has been late, this one will be late too. We don't have to accept that. We can create projects by defining that project well, by having the team involved, and they aren't late, and we deliver projects on time. We can do that. I don't care what your history is, we can do that, and we can turn it quickly. Losing contact with customers. We have this idea, we talk to a few customers, and then we go and take them to beta. And in the 6 months or 9 months in between, we can't show customers anything. We don't have time for a beta. That's not true. There's always stuff you can show people. We turn a blind eye to our competitors. We see new things coming out, but we don't even look at it. And that's an opportunity to make small adjustments in the project. And we have poorly thought out launch planning. We don't know when the project's going to launch. I don't need to be that involved with it. Let me know when you're ready to launch. And by the time we launch, we don't have all the planning. We don't have all the assets. We're not ready. So those are 5 things that we see a lot. I want to introduce this as a key concept. This is the first half of a key concept. The cost of delay, it's a lot higher than you think. So if you said, hey, I'm going to delay a project 3 months, this is a mythical project that's whatever months long, and it eventually gets up to $4 million a year, and we delay it 3 months, and you think you've lost a tiny amount of revenue, and you say, oh, we can tolerate that. But the truth is, the whole curve gets pushed out. When you lose that first 3 months, you don't just lose that first 3 months and get back on the original growth curve. All of those things, winning those hard customers, they all still happen. And so that whole growth curve gets out. We wind up losing all of this revenue, which is essentially the revenue of a delay of 3 months at the peak revenue. So I didn't lose this tiny sliver, I lost this big bar. And the net out of this is, if I have a $4 million peak revenue project, and I'm losing $1 million of revenue every 3 months. If I have a 12-month delay, I'm probably losing roughly $4 million of revenue. And so what we want to do here is, what we want to recognize this amount of revenue is way more than you think it is if you just look at that tiny sliver. So the second half is, how do we stay on time? Jacob Goldrat's bottleneck. We want to stay on that bottleneck. And what is the bottleneck for a project? We'll talk about this, but the bottleneck for a project is schedule. I can explain why. We don't have time right now. As you can tell, I can go on about this stuff and on and on. I'm just going to jump to here and say, hey, most people that have looked at this say the schedule is bottleneck. Does that mean we don't look at other requirements like design for manufacturability? Absolutely not. They are subordinate to the bottleneck, which means the bottleneck becomes a kind of currency. And we use that currency then to tell us what's going on in the subordinate. So let me just do one for you. I have a phase gate set of requirements. Do I say, oh no, we're going to get the project on time, I'm going to ignore the requirements? Absolutely not. What we do is we look at a requirement, we missed one, we forgot about the vibration test. Oh my gosh, that's going to cost us 4 weeks. See, 4 weeks is the currency of the bottleneck, and we want to restate it. And that lets us compare all of these disparate causes. We now have a single currency. And so we can say, if I hire this consultant, it's going to cost us $140,000, but I can get 8 weeks back to the schedule. Oh, 8 weeks, what's 8 weeks worth? Do you guys see it? It will change your thinking through and through. That concept from Goldrat from the 1980s, one of the most brilliant concepts ever in product development. And so, what is our key concept? The cost of delay is higher than you think. Don't let delay go by. Focus on the bottleneck. So when we think, how do we at Lean Focus deal with this? Well, what we do is we create visual project management as the bottleneck. And then the subordinate, the subordinates are your phase gate system. Is your launch readiness ready? These are all tools. How is your design for manufacturability? Are you getting continuous feedback from the user throughout? And how are you looking at competitors? So at Lean Focus, what we do is we say, yeah, we want to look at all these things during development, but we're going to organize them by schedule. When we have a gap, we're going to talk about it in terms of schedule. When we talk about making up that gap and there's a cost, we're going to equate it to schedule. I'm not going to say I have to hire a consultant. They're so expensive per hour. Maybe I will. But at the end, the question is, I'm going to spend that money. How much time am I going to recover? It'll change your thinking. You'll make new decisions. You'll make faster decisions. You'll make better decisions. Finally, in our last couple of minutes, I want to talk about deploy. Deploy is the simplest and it's the easiest place to go find immediate value. I call it hope as a strategy. Let's get the product out there and let's see how it does. And we'll come back in 6 months. If it's not going well, let's go check. We failed to track operational issues. What's the quality look like? Is somebody looking at this every week, or is this something that shows up on a bowler behind 15 other products? What about customer acceptance? Are people buying it at the rate we thought? Are we even measuring that? How many companies have I worked for where you'll go ask the sales department, what's your success rate when you sell? What were you expecting? No idea. Well, how do we know if we're performing to expectations? How do we know if we even have a problem? We cannot have that failure when we introduce a new product. We need to put a spotlight on that, at least for this first 6 or 12 months. And then we don't really have a team that's ready to do the problem solve. We have a group of people, something's wrong. Yeah, something's always wrong. Every product we have has issues. They'll work out. We'll get it a year and a half from now after a competitor's launched, and we've lost opportunities we'll never get again. So what's the key takeaway? Success results from good problem solving. So this is one of my favorite pictures, just shows what's going on. I launch a product, I want to get to a successful launch. What does that mean? It means I have to overcome a bunch of barriers. You know, what are some of the barriers we have here? Hey, the sales team wasn't trained. Ever seen that before? Because we just put a webinar on screen and there's no measurement. We never did the role play where we actually saw if people got it. We never did any kind of even simple testing. So well, guess what? Our salespeople show up and they're doing their email. Is anybody surprised? Happens all the time. So how do we create results in our training versus just putting out training and hoping? What about a defect? Oh, we've got some kind of a major quality defect. Well, doesn't that show up when the boss is doing the monthly review? Nah, it doesn't even show up. Why? Because it's such a small amount of revenue compared to the company's major revenue. It's on the bottom of the list of where direct revenue is being affected. Okay, huge effect on future revenue, but it doesn't show up at ordinary operational meetings. Oh, we didn't do the assets in French. I've seen this one. You know, we had we had a huge plan that was dependent on especially in France, on taking up this new product because we had a big gap in France and Belgium, but we never did any assets in French. They're coming in 6 months. Really? And that's a surprise. Happens all the time. So where's the team that's watching for this? And then, of course, we put a feature out. The clinicians don't like it. They won't use it. And we find out a year later. Where is the team that is watching this daily? That's like, hey, France and Belgium, what's happening? Why did you not hit this month what you thought? Oh my gosh, no assets. We got to pull somebody in. You know, that real rapid problem solving that gets us over these boundaries so we get a successful launch. You know, hope is not a great strategy, but it's really often used for launches. So how do we deal with that? Well, we use the Shewhart cycle, sometimes called the Deming cycle, Plan, Do, Check Act, or you might have seen Plan, Do, Study Act, but we basically just go out there and we problem solve like crazy. We have a launch readiness that shows us what do we want to accomplish with this launch over the coming 12 months, and then we watch it month by month. So we have a plan where we're using launch readiness and just developing that plan so we know where we're going. Then we create a launch control room. That's another one of our tools. So we know every day, or at least every week, we know how we're performing to that plan. We check. We have a QDC tracker, and we go out. We call it 8 minutes at Gemba, where we have our finger on the pulse of our sales group. So every week, I can tell you how 15 different reps, what their experiences were, what they ran into, what the trends are, what we've got to do so this product sells better. Let's not wait for 6 months and see that we missed. Let's find out this week why our win rate is not what we thought. Now, when we actually get into ACT, you know, we've made a plan. We did that as a innovation tool. We have a launch control room. That's an innovation tool because launch is innovation. We have our trackers that are really around these things, our 8 minutes at Gemba. But when we get into ACT, we are back to the foundations. How are we problem solving? Do we need to do transactional process events? When are we holding Kaizen? That's why you see these painted in pale blue, because pale blue is Lean Focus's color for foundation. If you do all this and you don't have trained problem solvers, people who know the basics, who know how to run a problem solve system, if you don't have those things, then you can do all of the plan, do, check you like. If you don't know how to act, you're not going to get much benefit. So we have to go back and teach people how to problem solve. You're not born knowing how to do it, and they don't teach it in college. We got to make sure that people know how to solve those problems, who know how to drive results. We know how to teach people that. We're very comfortable doing it. It's got to be part of the way you look at your launches. So with all that, let's look at the whole innovation journey. So during this talk, I've introduced to you, and you've seen each of these little green boxes appear in the different sections. And this is how they lay out for us as a single connected process, back from segmentation, who do I want to serve, all the way down to launch control room, am I serving them? Everything in between. There's not a box you saw that's missing. There's not a box that's been added. All of these, this is what's representative of our talk. And then I just want to take one moment and we'll go to Q&A. But I want to talk to you. You can go to any group of people. They can take a bunch of disparate projects and they can slap them down on a piece of paper. How do you know you have a system that really is interconnected? That those arrows really work, and somebody didn't just put down a process from 5 years ago that we don't use anymore with a couple that we're just starting, a few that maybe work pretty well. How do you know they're working? Well, here's the artifact. I want to give you a clue to go look for, and that is go search for the standard work that interconnects those workflows. So I'm going to go back and forth between these two slides for a moment, but I want you guys to look at, you know, here's a simple example. I have design thinking. When I do design thinking, how do I know that I did a good job at design thinking? When I go do my project requirements Kaizen, that might be getting 20 people together for 3 days to walk through every detail of this project, because at the end of this week, we're approving this project. That would be the end of the discovery project. That's where we're really defining the project. How do I know the design thinking was done well? How do I know? I'm not going to find out when I come up to the meeting that some things are missing. Well, I'm going to flip to the next slide. We have a market requirement document. It's pretty comprehensive. We can look through the whole document. We can leave 3 or 4 weeks between these two events, and we can look at that interconnecting standard work, and we can say, yeah, that's enough. And it's the same thing coming out of the project requirements Kaizen. Do I have the market product requirements document? And do I have, you know, which you can see the differences, right? I come in with market requirements, I leave with market product requirements. Do I have a financial schedule that everybody signed up to? The CFO believes in it. The R&D leader is committed. That's what the budget looks like. Do I have that? All of this standard work is interconnected. Standard work connects all of these tools together. If you don't have that, then these can look like a bunch of projects that you don't know. How do I know? Did you do it? Did you do it well? Is it even up to date? How do you know that? Because the standard work interconnects. Okay, next steps. How do we get started? Do you find things you find interesting here? Is there a part of this, or even all of this, that you're interested in? Well, if you're interested in just a part of it, Lean Focus is, we are definitely comfortable with the a la carte solution, where you come to us and say, you know, I really like what you had to say about design thinking or visual project management. Could you come and help us with that? We do that. We also do a complete innovation assessment that looks across the entire innovation model. And we come by and look at the whole story, at your entire, what in Lean is often called a value stream. And we look across your entire value stream and say, where are the places we can do the most good? We're available for that as well. It's a very popular tool for us to get started, so that you know you're working on the main thing. One of my favorite Eli Goldbrad expressions is, there are 100 good things to work on. They're just 1, maybe 2 that really move the needle or really make a difference. I like the innovation assessment because it makes sure we're finding that one versus just diving in and working on what we think is important. I want to direct you to Lean Focus, and this is one webinar in a series of many. You have access to all of these. You can sign up at the URL you see right here, and you can get this. You'll have many other webinars. And then my final one of my favorite guys is Taiichi Ohno. He's the father of the Toyota production system. In fact, a little known fact, I read in the foreword to one of his books, before it was called the Toyota production system, it was called the Ohno production system. Toyota didn't trust it. It was really different. But he brought it. He's a Chinese-born, Japanese descent person, went to Japan, a little bit of an outsider, but came in and changed the world, created what is often called the third industrial wave. He and I want to say Takeshi Toyota, the two of them are just absolute giants in this field. And I love his expressions. I have books of his expressions, but one of them is, if you're going to do Kaizen, you've got to assume things are a mess. If you're attending this Kaizen thinking, you know, we're okay, we do all right, people don't complain that much, you're not going to generate a lot of improvement. One of the consistent things I see, the better groups are, the more they talk about how many things they have to fix. It's an inverse proportional relationship. You know, the people who talk about how things are great, they really know how to do stuff, it's all fine, that group almost always, they struggle in performance. People who take on this truism from Ohno, they're always talking about what we got to fix. Those people are always the highest performers, the fastest to change. I love this expression, and there's dozens more I love from Ohno. If you come to another guy's webinar, you'll probably hear a couple With that, let me bring the presentation to an end. And Damon, let me open up the floor. If there are any questions, be glad to take them.
Thanks, George. Have several questions here for you. All right, so right out of the gate, question number one, we don't collect data on revenue attainment. How can we get started here?
Yeah, that's a great question. And a lot of people, I hear that all the time. And what people mean by that is, our company has an ERP system and it collects revenue across the world. But, we go through distribution. Are we trying to collect sell in or sell out? What's the kind of data that we need? It's not really organized for the new product team. So I'm going to give you the advice that you get in lean thinking all the time. Start by doing it manually. When you launch a product, there's not that much work to collect the data manually because the product's new, it's just been released, and the number of sales aren't that large. And so typically what we recommend people do is just go through, take a couple of hours once a month, collect all the sources, put it together. Then over months, you can learn how to automate it. Don't sit back and wait. Give your IT the job of going and making it so you can collect it automatically. Come back in 3 months. Turns out the application wasn't what you needed anyway. Don't do that. Just do it manually, collect it, learn how to do it. And then when you go to IT, you're going to know exactly what you need. And in the meantime, you can start your process the day of launch.
Great. Next question. Our company doesn't do a strategic plan. It sounds like we need to do this before we can start Aspire. Is that true?
Absolutely not. When we talked about this a little bit earlier, you might have heard me talking about how people, if you don't, there is a strategy at your company. Okay, they don't go through the process. They don't put it in a 70-page PowerPoint. It's not reviewed by the board. All right, those are all things we'd love to have. And if you can get those things, great. But if you don't have them, don't let that stop you. There is a strategy. Maybe you ask the CEO of the company, get the R&D leader together, product marketing leader, sales leader, and write down what are the 3 things we want to accomplish with new products this year. Get that discussion going, and discover. Don't create a strategy in the beginning. Discover what the strategy is that you already have. Take that strategy, build consensus around it. If you haven't written it down and you've got 6 members on your senior leadership team, there are going to be 6 strategy plans. Okay, let's get everybody to write them down. They're going to have a lot in common. Let's just get one. Discover what the plan is. Use that for your first year. Then as you're going into your second year, somewhere around August, you can say to the boss, hey, that strategy thing we did last year? Could you guys do a little more on that a little sooner? It would really help us. And you'll be able to single piece flow, build that strategy that you need for an effective product development group.
What advice do you have for startup companies that don't have a lot of resources and they don't yet know even what they want?
That is a great question. I would say, if you don't know what you want, obviously we need to be spending enough time over in that left part. I hope you don't mind, David, I'm gonna just run back to this.
Yeah, sounds like user workflow discovery to me.
Yeah, you need to be spending your time in here. Like, do you know when you say you don't know what you want, I have a few questions for you. Do you not know who you want to serve? Well, please don't start product development before you know who you're serving. It'll never be successful. Innovation engine, how do I align that to the critical few that serve my strategy? We've talked about that a lot. And then user workflow discovery. How am I doing those 30 interviews in the field? How am I going and doing those 10 observations and watching people use it? How am I mapping out the workflows that tell me where people are experiencing the serious pain points? I mean, those are the places where, if you want to do all those things. You guys know the biggest problem in problem solving is solving the problem before you understand it. So don't be afraid to invest in understanding that problem before you start pouring the money into the new product development.
Next question, can you give examples of how Discover reduces scope creep?
Absolutely, because I've seen it work, and I've been on both sides of this equation. And so if I think about a company that there's a product they want to do, and we have to make we're going to take the large features and decide if they're in or out. So let me go back to one of the examples I used in the talk. Internet of Things. Am I going to have it? What's it going to do? Or am I not going to have it? So you want great clarity on Internet of Things, so you know exactly what products have to be invested. For example, am I allowed to grab onto the customer's Wi-Fi? Or do I have to have, do I basically need to have my own cell phone reception so that I can bring my data back independent of the user? Who, deciding who owns that data when we're done? How are we sharing it with the client? Really being diligent about, this is the parameters of using Internet of Things. This is what, and then also what benefit will Internet of Things give us? So a real common thing to do in a marketing spec is, we need Internet of Things so we understand user experiences. I don't think that's going to help a development team. What in the world does that mean? Versus, I want to know when this X-ray tube is nearing its end of life. I want to know when the last, how many of the last, we just mixed 60 samples of ink. How many of those were good? How many were bad? I want that in Internet of Things so I can contact a customer and say, hey, your bad rate of mix is a lot higher than we expect. What's going on here? So, so being very specific will stop the scope creep later in the project when people say, well, we need this feature to do whatever that thing was. Well, we didn't plan for that. Well, we got to have our own cell phone. We can't depend on Wi-Fi on the factory floor. We can't get through the firewall. Well, you really should have thought of that before we invested $3 million in this project. So Damon, that's one example that just comes to mind. I don't know why Internet of Things comes so quickly to mind, but there are just 100 like that. Getting good definition so there's no room for scope creep, because it demands that people really think things through before we start.
Okay, maybe we got time for probably two more questions here.
George, question on the phone here. Do you see Lean Agile Scrum development, specifically with software, only tied with the design or discover and design?
Oh, for me, whether you're, what I would say here is, when we're talking about the project management methods, I might be using waterfall with the Gantt chart. I might be using Lean Agile. There are other methods. I might be using Scrumban. There are lots of ways to do the work that I'm actually managing the execution. However, I don't see a lot of the other things changing. I mean, you might say design for manufacturability. Isn't that all about fasteners and connectors? Well, I've watched companies have huge amounts of problems trying to get authentication right for new customers. It's a real manufacturing issue, because manufacturing can't manage to get straight how to do authentication without a 3-day process. So, when I think of lean phase gate systems, the same way, you might say, isn't that for when I'm doing design and validation as a separate step? In Agile, I'm doing design and validation continuously. And I might say, yeah, those are true, but your lean phase gate system is still going to have milestones that your software's got to meet for you to be able to get your recognition of your product. So I've seen this work pure. I've seen what you see here working. If it's pure Agile, if it's pure waterfall, if it's a mix of the two, or if it's got some other kinds in it. We need to be flexible so that the type of work we do the type of execution management we do is independent of how we delight customers. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
And let's do one more question. This one comes from Todd. When doing a new product line of 7 different sizes, do you suggest running each one separately or the whole project at the same time using different phases?
Well, Todd, that's a great question. That's really detailed, and I would say the answers to that question vary a lot depending on the product, and especially depending on the time. So let me give you an example of what I mean. If you're talking about having to bring out, let's say, $8 million of tooling, because sizes 1 and 2 take one set of tooling, sizes 3, 4, 5 take one set of tooling, and 6, 7, 8, they take a whole nother set, or maybe it's even more than that. Then you may need to group those so that you're able to get part of the product out and start generating revenue as soon as possible to pay for the others. On the other hand, if you were doing products where there was almost no tooling, I would think a lot about trying to bring them out together and on time. So really, there's only one way to answer your question, and you're not going to like the answer because it's hard, which is I think you need to lay out at a high level back in the requirements Kaizen when you're setting the targets. I think you need to lay out a couple of high level models. What does this look like if I do 1 through 7? What does this look like if I put them in 3 groups? What does it look like if I do all of them? What's the revenue return look like? And I think you have to evaluate those one by one. I've come across the problem you're talking about, where that process might even take 2 years to bring them all out. We're not going to wait 2 years to start making any revenue. We can't afford to, and it doesn't serve our customers either. It just lets competitors in where we shouldn't be letting them in. I've also seen where we do the whole thing at once and we say, hey, embrace the complexity, do it all together. It really depends on diligent engineering evaluation and comparing of the alternatives through project financial performance.
All right, so with that, we're at the top of the hour, George. Thank you. I always enjoy listening to your presentations. You have a lot of passion for the subject, and it really shows through in your energy and how you deliver it. So just a reminder, this presentation will be made available to you in an email. You will receive that into your inbox. If not, please check your spam folder, but it will have a recording of this presentation that you can watch at your leisure at a later date. So with that, thank you for participating. Thank you, George, and have a great rest of your day. Bye now.
Thanks, everybody.